A warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session in which we will talk about dual-use research. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Georg Schütte. I'm Secretary General of the Volkswagen Foundation. The Volkswagen Foundation is a public benefit foundation that supports science and research. Every time I introduce myself, I have to say that we are not a corporate social responsibility entity of the Volkswagen car manufacturing company. Rather, when the company was privatized in the early 1960s, it became stock listed and the revenues were given to us. And ever since, we had the privilege to spend the money on science and research, which is an enormous privilege. But an even better and larger privilege is to be on this stage together with a very distinguished group of panelists. So there is the Chief of Defense in Germany, Carsten Breuer, who in German is called Generalinspekteur der Bundeswehr, so the highest-ranking military officer in Germany and somebody with a very strategic outlook. Next to him is Alex van... Thank you very much. Next to him is Alex van Someren. He's the UK Chief Scientific Advisor for National Security, working across the intelligence services and right next to defense, as I learned. And so we will get a British perspective from him. On my left side is Professor Alice Aiken. She is the Vice President for Research and Innovation of Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada, and was a member of the Canadian military for quite some time, working in the medical field and looking at military and veterans' health, amongst others. And last but not least, there is Ursula Staudinger, a rector of the University of Dresden, and so standing for being here on the panel for one of the largest and very successful German universities. So here is our agenda for today. We will focus first on military necessities from the German side, and then take a look at the broad approach of a German university, how to deal with it as an institution which bears a public responsibility and also has internal tensions on how to deal with military matters. And then we open the perspective to the UK and to the Canadian side. After having done that, we will engage in a debate or include you. We will see how it's going to continue. But first of all, I will turn to Carsten Breuer. He published an article in the weekly newspaper Decide, in which he outlined the necessities of transforming the German defense system in order to react to the current and future challenges. Carsten Breuer, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Schütte. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel very honored to be here this morning with the Falling Walls Science Summit for the first time for me this year. I congratulate on the holistic approach you're doing here, and I'm looking forward very much to our discussion. Falling Walls, the name says it all. It stands for a new era of freedom, and we have been able to enjoy this freedom over the last, I would say, 35 years. We have lived in peace together with friends in our neighborhood. We had fallen in love with the state and called it Friedensdividende, peace dividend. But now we sadly have to recognize that honeymoon is over. We have war in Ukraine for almost 1,000 days. We have war in the Middle East for nearly 400 days. Iran is expanding its claim to power, and we have China with its expansive territorial claims. Some might add the recent US elections results as an evidence for growing uncertainty. However, I disagree on this point, because first, the bonds between the US and Europe are so close, so tight, and I'm sure they will last. And second, I'm convinced also a calculating businessman will see the need and the advantage for an alliance. The moment the US fully withdraws from Europe, it stops being a global power. That doesn't mean that we can relax here in Europe. Definitely not. Europe, and particularly Germany, must carry its burden regarding not only our regional security. New in this situation is everything is interconnected. Crises merge and reinforce each other. In this respect, Ukraine is a burning glass. We see soldiers from North Korea there, drones from Iran, and dual-use weapons from China. Things that used to come from the West and were connected to a rules-based international order. Nowadays, those things come from Beijing. And China is an enabler of all of this, not only technology-wise. And there's a second thing that's new. In the past, military was very often the main or the premium driver of technical developments. Research was very often determined by strategic benefits. Today, it's just the other way around. Technological developments create strategic challenges. Doctrine and strategy are not any longer driving technological development. We have to adjust quite the opposite way. We have to adjust strategy towards this development. And we have to do it fast. And when it comes to artificial intelligence and quantum computing, I often ask myself, what is next for this? What is it what we do not see today or what we ignore to see? But this might and will have a massive impact. In all this discussion, drones come to mind. And if we look into Ukraine, once again, there is this burning glass. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to scare you, but indeed the situation is serious. We are in Europe, we are here in Germany under threat again. And this fuels the technological fire I've described even more. We need two things: a new sense of urgency and a collective breakthrough. Let it come to a match. Let's join forces and pull it all in one direction. I would advocate security is like oxygen. You forget that it's there until it's gone. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. In your article, if I may just follow up, you said it's not only military capacity in terms of number of tanks, in terms of number of drones. We also see an increase in sabotage, in espionage, in hybrid ways of influencing communities. So talking about technologies, how do you see this hybrid type of warfare and the level of awareness that we need there?
Well, at the moment, and it's clear we are under this hybrid threat. So it's the status between, it's not any longer real peace, but it's not war. We are in between, and it's going forth and back. And an adversary has the possibility to create strategic challenges out of this. He has the possibility to escalate and de-escalate without that we can do very much about this. And it's very often in that way that we can't attribute where it comes from, and therefore we can't react on this. So we are under this threat right now, and we see that this threat is upcoming. But this is only one part, because when we are talking hybridity, it's not stopping within the cyberspace, and it's not stopping with propaganda. It always prepares also a kinetic attack, or at least the possibility of a kinetic attack. And therefore we have to be aware, and probably a last thought on this, hybridity can't be only conquered, you can't only have a military answer. You need a whole society approach on this. You need a whole society answer on this.
That is the perfect translation to Ursula Staudinger, and I will close with a final quote from your article in my personal translation. And it goes like, "We are not without defense. We have to act together as a whole of society, and it's not only the task of the military. We can no longer outsource security to somebody else." Ursula Staudinger, we cannot outsource security. It is a challenge to the whole of society, and universities do play a special role. What kind of responsibility do you see from a university, from an academic side and angle?
Well, I'm speaking here for Dresden University of Technology, which is one of the largest and research-intensive universities in Germany, one of the Ivy Leagues that we have since the excellence competition. And for us, it's very clear that universities, as huge academic institutions financed by the taxpayer, we have a clear social and societal responsibility. And in Europe, and in particular in Germany, a very special responsibility comes to us, which is of a completely new nature as compared to the last 50 years since the end of Second World War. And it's our responsibility towards the inside for the different groups that make up a university, be it the students, be it the professors, the scientists, be it the administration, to start a very deep and complex discussion about the new historical situation that we are in, and that things we have believed in the past to be obvious and natural, such as living in peace, are not of that nature any longer, and that this has consequences for us as a society and for universities as members of this society in particular. Second, I would say that given this tremendous transformation, historical transformation, we have to revisit the notion of dual use. It is our understanding that this term has run its course, and it has multiple reasons why it has run its course. First, the speed and rapidity of technology change is so fast that one thing that didn't be dual use yesterday is dual use now. Second, the interdisciplinarity and the linkages between different research contributions have come closer and closer, and so it gets harder and harder to really determine where does dual use start and where does it end. So one suggestion in this discussion could be to really move to a more integrative approach, which would not make a distinction between civil research and security or defense-related research, but think about the usefulness for society, and in both ways. So what can actually hamper and jeopardize society, and what can help. So I definitely think we have to overcome this distinction because it's not meaningfully applicable any longer. And my third point is that we have to look to nations, I'm speaking now for Germany, but probably it's true for Europe at large, EU, Europe. We have to look to nations who, after Second World War, had, due to their role in Second World War, taken a different decision to prepare for the competition in innovation and technology advances to protect a country. So I'm speaking, for instance, the United States of America. And going back to the Sputnik initiative, they created an institution called DARPA. I've spent 8 years in an Ivy League university in the United States, and I can only say, without the DARPA-funded fundamental and applied research, none of the Ivy League universities would be able to survive in the dimension as they are. So I see a challenge for us in Germany and the science system in Germany to very carefully and very purposefully, intentionally establish a peer-reviewed top-level system that brings the necessary research funding for security and defense and society protective research into the German system of science management. It's crucial, because if we do not bring the standard of high-level expertise and research to that money that is there and that needs to be implemented more quickly than we can think, that will be a major drawback for Germany. So I'm pledging we need to think of building the right structures, and we need to start this careful discussion and analysis within our universities to bring people together for this new historical situation.
Well, thank you very much. 3 arguments: special responsibility, revisit the notion of dual use, and DARPA as a breakthrough type of funding. I would like to just ask a question for a 4th point. Given the German national history, there is, of course, a concern also amongst the student population at German universities to prevent that type of militarism that we saw emerging from Germany in the 20th century, creating all the horrors of the past century. So there is a cultural awareness of the danger of military research, and at the same time you say there is a special responsibility. It creates tensions at German universities. There is a number of German universities that have special provisions not to engage in military research. Are universities transforming? Are they revisiting this notion? How do they address the tension?
Well, I tried to say this in my short remarks, and I can recapitulate. I can only speak for our university, and I can say that yes, we engage in these discussions, but they will take time because it is not so easy to adapt to such disruptive and fundamental historical transformations, and to re-establish an attitude and an argument. One thing is clear. It is not enough to resort back to arguments from the 1960s and the 1970s, because the circumstances have so fundamentally changed. And as academic institutions, we have the responsibility to get this exchange to a higher level of complexity. And we have to master it. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Alex von Someren, first of all, I have to thank you again because you stepped in on a rather short notice to replace Helge Braun, who was supposed to be on this panel, but given the current developments in German politics, I suppose that you all understand that there are different types of obligations. Having said that, we are extremely happy that you are here, because we just heard from Ursula Staudinger about a more pragmatic approach in the Anglo-Saxon world, and I do not want to put the United States and the UK just in one basket, but it's a more, culturally, there seems to be a more pragmatic approach. And as Chief Scientific Advisor for National Security, how do you organize this transfer of knowledge in the United Kingdom? Is it going smoothly? Is there a longer tradition? Are there cultural barriers that we discussed from a German perspective? Alex.
Thank you. So I think that we have perhaps had a bit more time, and we have perhaps a more relaxed cultural environment towards this kind of collaboration. We see the desirability of academic innovation and industrial innovation in our national security and defense infrastructure as being absolutely essential. One of the interesting changes, we heard from Ursula about the importance of DARPA, and I think it's true to say that many significant waves of technology in the last few decades have come as a result of government investment, particularly driven by defense and security interests. And one of the things which is importantly different about the current environment we find ourselves in is the most recent wave of innovation, which we hear so much about in artificial intelligence, is particularly different from the past because it actually comes from the investment of private money in the technology industry and not significantly as a result of investment from government. So actually, we need to be very sensitive to that, because that says the axis of the world is shifting and the significance of industrial partners is much greater than it has been before. In order to capitalize on that, we need to continue to have good collaborations with our academic institutions. And of course, inevitably, some of them have people within them who have a bias away from working with government, and some of them are happy to work with government. And so we have to accept that that spectrum will exist. The same is also true in the investment world of private money, that actually bringing the money necessary to match public sector investment in innovation and research needs the support of the private sector. But some of the developments of the past few years around ESG guidelines, for example, prohibit, in some cases, investment into the kind of research and innovation which can be important for defense and security. So thinking about how that situation also needs to evolve, whether ESG really needs to resist this, whether that's actually something which is helpful to our broader societal goals, is important. In the UK, we've been lucky about 5 years ago to establish an investment activity specifically in the government to support national security and defence. So our National Security Strategic Investment Fund works with police, with defence, and with the intelligence agencies to try to ensure that we get the capital behind the ideas, both academic and industrial, which are helpful to bringing us the technology which we need. Many of us, I think, will accept that government does not always move as quickly as other parts of the world. And the technological world in particular accelerates ever faster, and there's a risk that governments get left behind if they're not able to capitalize on those developments and indeed to protect ourselves from those developments. So trying to increase that pace of action, trying to ensure that government takes advantage of these opportunities from academia and industry and invest in those technologies to get access to them faster is really essential if we're not going to see a widening gap between the relatively slow movement of government in adoption of technology and the pace at which that technology is being invented. So I think we've been fortunate to work with international partners on this already. There's recently been a significant partnership announced between the UK and Germany in the area of defence, the Trinity House Compact, and that's really important to signal that we care fervently about working together with our European partners on this topic, and we'll continue to work, of course, with our own universities and our own investors to support this, but I really welcome the opportunity to also do that across the European divide, even though we currently remain outside the bureaucratic boundary.
Well, thank you very much. Let me just follow up on that term, National Security Strategic Investment Fund. There is this term in business administration that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Let's focus a little bit on cultural differences. You said governments move slowly. How does the military sector move as opposed to or with regard to the academic sector? And is it possible to overcome the cultural hurdles between the two sectors?
Well, I should probably defer to an expert on this point. I won't answer for defence. I don't represent defence. What I can tell you is that you're right that it is sometimes hard for people working in the public sector to be able to achieve the same pace as in the private sector. And yet, there are really good reasons for that. You know, the permissions which we have to do the things which we do come from a compact with our citizens, which says we are allowed to do these things because we need to do them for national security and defence. So there is law, there is governance, there are other reasons why we cannot always move in the way we might want to. To be able to increase the permeability of the system, to let things flow more freely. People, ideas, to upskill more people, to help them to understand how we think in the national security and defence world, to help the people who come from inside the public sector to spend more time in the private sector, understanding how startups work, how investors think. That movement of people and ideas is probably the most important thing which can help to break down those barriers.
Thank you very much. And I have to thank Professor Alice Aiken for your patience.
No, that's
we heard a lot, and you are a person that works in both fields. You have been member of the Canadian military for 14 years, you said, and you're focusing on military and veterans' health. So you are a life sciences, a medical expert working at the border with regard to the defense and military sector. Tell us about your experience, how to address and enable the permeability you spoke about, and how to walk between those fields.
Yeah, I think, you know, from a Canadian perspective, again, I would say for many years we've had a much more relaxed attitude towards defense and security and research. Our government recently came out with new research security guidelines. So in order to obtain federal funding, our researchers, all grants have to be reviewed by a research security expert, and there are named research organizations with whom we can have no partnerships. So that's a fundamental change, and I think has brought the reality of security into our lives. We don't have a war on our border. I don't know what's going to happen given the election of the last week, but we also we do play in we do research that is definitely any research, we're one of the U15 research-intensive universities in Canada, and any research-intensive university does dual-use work. And to Ursula's point, dual use is not a clear definition. We're all part of the Wassenaar Agreement, and it says it's conventional weapons and dual use and gives a bunch of categories, but you often don't know when something's dual use until you hit a wall and they say, wait, this is dual use. I'm not sure there's a great definition, and I don't think when it was formed in '96 that they had any idea where AI would take research. So I think it's a very difficult prospect to navigate, and we are seeing many more things that would be considered dual use. So my university is an enormous ocean science university, and a lot of marine technologies are dual use. And so to Alex's point, we have a lot of partners that want to work with us from the private sector as well, and startups, and really doing due diligence around those companies to see their motivations, their histories has been enormous for universities as well. And I just think it is something that we all have to take more seriously. It's not that we shouldn't do the work, we just have to do our diligence. I did want to make a comment about DARPA though, because DARPA does fund amazing research. They funded all the original research for the internet. But the money for DARPA comes entirely from defense companies. That is the entire funding for DARPA. And the US has a lot of money in DARPA. It does amazing work. They do cutting edge, high risk research. And I know Canada loved the model of DARPA, and we met with them and we tried to start our own, but we don't have the defense industry to fund it, nor are they interested in funding it. So I would... It needs to be public money. It does, yeah. And I think you're not going to get the volume of public money, not in Canada anyways, that DARPA has. So I think it's a great model. And DARPA's open to research anywhere in the world, but I do actually think now, as we look across our sector, we're going to have to rethink the Wassenaar Agreement about dual use. So Russia's a signatory to that, so nothing's been able to change in 2 years. We're going to have to look at NATO, if NATO still exists. And we're really going to have to think about what dual use is and is not. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the privilege of being part of a European expert group on the future of European research collaboration. And within that group, we had a very pragmatic approach with regard to dual-use research. We echoed your argument. Modern research has the potential of being of dual use across a broad field of research and disciplines. So let's be pragmatic and organize research in a way that the two areas fertilize each other. However, a key argument is money. Do we take money away from other types of research simply to support the defense and the defense industry? You said that DARPA has a reverse flow of funding. It's industry money that goes into research. The research budget of the Federal Ministry of Defense is small. It's a minute budget.
Yeah.
If we want to increase and want to broaden defense research, how do we go about it, and how do you enter this debate without risking the counter-argument, don't take the money away from us in the civil research field?
Well, I think in the military, regarding budget, we have the problem that we have to, at least in the German military, but I think it's true for other European and probably also for other NATO militaries as well, we have to fill a gap. We have to fill this gap what I call the peace dividend. So we did not invest enough over the last 30 years. And this is out of different reasons, and the decision for this pretty much clear, and they were taken in that time period when they were taken. So not looking back, but looking forward. In filling those gaps and seeing an annual budget, even if we are talking about the 2% of GDP for defense expenditures, it's not enough. And therefore, if you see a threat coming towards you, you better prepare for the threat. And researching you can do later. I know this is not the right approach, but to overcome this attitude, you have to do both, or in doing both, you need more money for this. And I would argue for having a steady budget and probably a budget which is not limited to 1 year, not taking a yearly budget, to give defense industry, but also in research, a longer than a 1 year perspective. This would help to really look to those challenges we have to face in the future.
Just to get a sense of scale, on a European level between 2021 and 2027, we spent about 8 billion euro on defense research and 95 on Horizon Europe. So it's a tenfold funding for a non-defense research. We argued in our group that for the next framework program, we would need 220 billion for non-defense research. But then again, we also need further money for European funding. If we talk about European collaboration in terms of military development, an expert told me that in the United States they have about 150 technology platforms for military instruments. In Europe we have 370. So can we come up with a European defense industry supported by European research funding in a foreseeable future?
Can we, and let me pose this or give this question back, can we overcome the different systems in defense spending and defense industry? So having in one country a more state-driven or government-driven defense industry, and have, on the other hand, a free market defense industry. You will never bring those two systems together. And when we are talking to have a common European approach, I think we have to argue and we have to develop more key technologies and make it very clear who has the ownership of those key technologies. This could be one way, but in aligning those different systems, I think we will fail.
Thank you very much. I have 3 comments and I go along this line. And if you're prepared to have a question after that, it's your turn. But first, Alex von Someren.
I just wanted to follow up on General Breuer's point that actually Germany's demonstrated some fantastic leadership on this point about bringing in innovation from smaller organizations. So there's been an announcement probably a couple of years ago now about allowing software developed by a startup to come onto an aerial platform that's deployed in the European sphere. That's exceptional. In the past, it would have always been some very large, relatively slow-moving, reassuringly expensive defense prime, which would have developed this kind of technology. The very idea that you would allow software developed by a startup onto an aerial defense platform is a huge step forward, because that means you can get access to this kind of fast-paced innovation in a way which was never the case before.
Alice.
And I just wanted to comment that I think it's really important that we don't just think of European research or all of Europe researching together. This is a global threat, right? We have to work together as the rest of the world. We know India, Russia, China are working very closely, and the rest of the world has to come together. And, you know, we're participating in Horizon Europe grants, many hoops to jump through and a lot of administration, but we are doing that. But I think it's really important that the world understands that we need to start cooperating much more closely, because in particular around defense industry, and a lot of research in Canada's, a lot of universities in Canada will not do any research that's classified as secret. And that's fine. The defense does their own research in that area. But I really think when we're thinking about technology, advanced technology, we've got to include companies, we've got to include all countries around the world. I think if Europe just looks to Europe, we'll have lost the boat.
Thank you. Ursula Staudinger, thank you for your patience.
No, not a problem. I just wanted to come back to what General Breuer said in terms of being forced to set priorities given the budgetary circumstances. I can follow this rationale. At the same time, we have to be aware any year that we are losing out on innovation will set us back. We are already set back because our defense industry has not been in the limelight. And so in my mind, we need to develop, not copy DARPA, and I thank you very much for clarifying the private money resource for DARPA. when I mentioned DARPA, I didn't mean to copy DARPA in terms of only based on private money. I think we have to develop our very unique German solution for that, and then on top a European Union solution. I don't think one can go without the other. What I wanted to point my finger to is this needs attention and serious collaboration between German science management individuals, the Defense Ministry, and the Ministry for Science and Research. And this, if we don't do this in time, irrespective of what the eventual budget will be, we will be losing out, and it will not come overnight, because the creativity you were mentioning that is out there in our startup scenery, in particular when it comes to cyber warfare and cyber protection, needs to be collected, and there need to be ways that feel just and that feel balanced. So yes, budgetary constraints, but we need to work in parallel.
Do we have such a platform of exchange, Chief of Defense Breuer?
Well, we have platforms of exchange, and we are looking into the Cyber Innovation Hub, for example, which is within the federal government, which is in the armed forces. This is basically it's a platform, and at the same time it's a kind of startup we are having there. I would not argue against what you said. Totally agree. But on the other hand, and this is probably the dilemma, we need to be fast and we need to be decisive on your part, what you have described. And on the other hand, I'm pretty much sure that Russia is preparing that they will be able in 2029 to attack NATO soil. They will be able, and I'm not saying that will happen, but they will be able. And from a military perspective, I would say I have to do worst case thinking, and therefore I have to be prepared in 29. So I take all the money which is available to put it into a defense. So, and this is, and I understand this means at least adapt for the future, but this is a dilemma we have to solve.
Again, a matter of scale, and then I have 1, 2, 3 questions. In your article, you said that Russia produces between 1,000 and 1,500 tanks, heavy tanks, per year. Germany does have 300, full stop. So here we have 1,000 to 1,500 per year as compared to 300. So there is a sense of urgency. We have Mr. Schmidt-Tomé from the university, from the Navy.
Go Navy.
Coming.
There's a microphone.
Hertie Schmidt-Tomé, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of the German Navy. Thank you very much for your presentation and the discussion on the panel. That was very much from the perspective top-down. And we faced the problems as our as General Breuer just mentioned, and we have a different approach that is bottom-up.
Who is we?
The German Navy. That is complementary. It's not that we don't be. We are still part of the German armed forces, of course, but.
Thanks for that.
Especially because the time matters. We follow a bottom-up approach by establishing an innovation ecosystem for the maritime dimension. And this is a bottom-up approach, which is voluntarily, and it's working really smooth. Mm-hmm. My question is to Alex and of course to you and the Canadian forces, do you have some similar experiences in your nations? Innovation ecosystems that are open, innovation systems open to anybody who wants to participate? And if so, what are your experiences? Thank you.
Clear question, Alex?
So yes, it's really important to get people who have operational experience at the front line into these kinds of innovation processes. It's also really important to get people who have no experience of this to bring the creative diversity into the process. And so how we do this is I do things like I fund research from postdocs who are thinking about topics which are valuable to us as the government, but also have a genuine dual-use application. I also incubate startups startups and I take ideas, IP from universities, and push them through acceleration programs to try to help those people to come up with ideas which will become businesses, and businesses which can become suppliers in order to help us with that. And finally, there are, of course, such people inside our national security and defense infrastructure, people who know how the mission really works, have ideas, want to leave and start startups. That's very uncomfortable for the system. It doesn't like the idea that people will leave, but actually it's incredibly important for those people to leave, to scratch that itch as an entrepreneur, to go and build something sustaining outside the government system, and then to be able to sell back to us. So we try to encourage all those kinds of behaviors and try to break down those walls as much as we can.
Thank you. Alice?
Yeah, and I'm going to take a Navy and ocean perspective. I was in the Navy, so, and Halifax is a big Navy town, so our university has enormous innovation and entrepreneurship programming. We try and expose all our students to entrepreneurial thinking so that they can survive in the innovation economy and thrive, right? That they have the mindset, the resilience to really thrive in the new economy. But Halifax itself is one of only 2 Canadian cities named in the top 50 global startup cities. Part of what you need is a research-intensive university, but we are, of course, right on the Atlantic Ocean. We have the largest Navy base, and what we've found is our startups are, as expected, a lot of people coming out of universities or out of graduate work. But what we notice in the ocean sector is a lot of the people starting startups there, because we have an enormous ocean startup community, are people who served in the Navy or in the Coast Guard and saw a need and came out and started an ocean startup company. So we do need, to Alex's point, we really need people who know the system and are coming out of the system to do what's right for the system. And it is, the ocean startup sector specifically is very different from other startup sectors. Yeah.
And just on an anecdotal basis, we as a foundation try to screen the horizon for new ideas, and we engage in a collaboration with the German Agency for Disruptive Innovation, Sprint, together with the US Naval Office of Global Research, just to organize pitches for startups with new ideas. So that was a horizon scanning exercise with a US partner from your field, which was completely non-defense, but very interesting and innovative. There is a question by a wonderful colleague from the Netherlands, Susanne Beuter, who is the director of a National Research Center for Geoscience Research. Susanne.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to bring in a bit of a question from the science perspective and also to bridge to the previous panel on science diplomacy. So I think from the science, very fast we have been landing with both feet on the ground where it concerns dual use and the realization that most of our science has some aspect of dual use. But at the same time, Alice, when you say certain organizations we won't collaborate with, we can see in Germany also from the government a push to maybe not work with certain countries and focus on others. So, and I understand also the need, science, military research to work together. These are all things we have to sort of bring together. But I would also argue that science is a bridge between countries. If we as scientists don't talk with each other anymore, then I think a lot is lost. Yeah. So how do we unite, the need that is expressed in this panel with science as a diplomacy factor?
So I just want to correct you quoting me. I didn't say there are organizations we wouldn't work with. There are organizations we are not allowed to work with. Our government forbids it. So I just want to be clear on that. But I agree with you about science diplomacy. I'm going to let Ursula take it.
No, I just wanted to give my 5 cents. I mean, it's a complex problem, of course. And I think when it comes to earth sciences and the future of our planet and the climate crisis, there is no way other than global cooperation. And there are other areas of research, however, where I would say we have to face realities of the geopolitical historical situation, and I would say we are in a very different situation vis-a-vis China as compared to the last 20 years. And India, we have to observe and see where it's going. And I think we have to look at these global cooperation approaches topic by topic. And I don't think we are in a historical era where we can afford for societal security and across the board prioritization of bridge building, because some of our bridges were misused, and we have to face that reality.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. In 15 minutes from now, I have to moderate a table on international collaboration in science and research, so that is perfect. I have two more remarks or questions. I have to apologize. One is there, and I'm sorry. It's no, one over there. It's André Lösekrug-Petri of Jedi, but André, only 15 seconds of marketing for your organization, and then there is a question over there.
No marketing at all. It's actually pushing on your comment, Georg. Ursula mentioned about DARPA. The baseline was no strategic surprise. So you mentioned about this foresight exercise. How do we in democracies include in our organizations this capacity of anticipating the next breakthrough disruptions? Europe seems to be the continent of strategic surprise. Ukraine, COVID, OpenAI, all surprises we are reacting to. How do you, Mr. Generalinspekteur, and how you and your organization bring that into the organizational structure?
All right, and then there is a last question over there, and I'm extremely rude, and I apologize to everybody who does not have a chance. Please.
Yes, thank you. I have the pleasure to coordinate a project with the 4 big universities in Berlin here that comprises those discussions of dual use. So that's why I wanted to ask you, Ms. Staudinger, what do you do at TU Dresden? Because this, the consciousness has to come from the top at the university leadership, that has to be aware of the urgency, but also from, like, let's say, at the bottom. How do you work with across departmental boundaries also? Could you give an example, please?
Okay, let's start with anticipatory capacity, and maybe this is a question for you.
Very, very happy to take this. I have to admit that we are not good in this, but not talking about the military, talking about our entire society, because we have not developed the right skills for being strategists. And this coming out of the land, out of the country of Clausewitz and von Moltke and so on. So the big strategic thinkers, we have left them before the Second World War. It's a little bit different, I would say, in the US, it's different in the UK, but it's more or less everywhere that we are not good in strategic development. We have to bring this not only in the military, in the society. I think we have to bring this back into the universities as well.
Thank you very much. Ursula Staudinger, a question with regard to Dresden University.
Very specific question, and I'm happy to answer. So we have really conducted, since the last year and a half, a very broadly based discussion within our university, because we had to revise our charter. And in the context of revising the charter and the preamble of it, we naturally came across the civic clause, and this started even before all the other outbreaks happened, started a very basic discussion within a University of Technology, and we reached a very good intermediate consensus, I would say. And I think given the current dynamics, how the geopolitical situation is shaping up, we will step into the next round of these discussions. We have at our university developed a format which we call University Forum, which brings for very controversial issues and topics, opens an agora place where we come together and everyone can say how he or she feels, and there's time taken to exchange arguments and do this in multiple rounds. It's not done with one. And it, like always in a self-governed institution, it takes patience, and it's a bottom-up and a top-down interaction.
Thank you very much. I realize that there were more questions from Mr. Apriamashvili, amongst others, and there, don't hesitate to come up for bilateral exchanges. For now, I would like to say thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the Hertie Foundation that made this panel possible. There is Annette Schawan and Astrid Proksch. Thank you very much. Then I would like to thank the Falling Walls Foundation, because this session was a real session about falling walls, and we have to continue the debate, and it's going to be an important debate in the years to come. As we could see throughout the past days, as we could see throughout the past years with the war in Ukraine, and as we could see throughout the past decade, because the war in Ukraine actually started 10 years ago in 2014. So it is an urgent debate, and for that reason, I thank the 4 panelists here. This was a very helpful and wonderful debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Georg.